I saw my daughter-in-law, Veronica, standing by the edge of Willow Lake, her silver sedan half hidden by the trees. The late afternoon sun shimmered on the water as she swung a heavy leather suitcase once, twice, and hurled it into the lake with all her strength. The splash echoed through the still air like a gunshot. My heart stopped. For a moment, she just stood there, watching it sink, her face twisted with something between fear and rage. Then she turned, got in her car, and sped away, leaving only dust and silence. I whispered, trembling, "Dear God, what have you done?" It was 5:15 in the afternoon, I remember, because I had just poured my tea and glanced at the kitchen clock, the same one my mother gave me on my wedding day. The clock had ticked through every moment of my life, the laughter of my son's childhood, the years of quiet after my husband's passing, and now the hollow silence that had taken root in this house. My house sat on a gentle hill overlooking Willow Lake, its surface flat and shining like glass that day. Everything felt too still, too calm, the kind of peace that never lasts. Since Daniel's funeral 6 months ago, the house had become a museum of echoes. His photographs lined the mantel, his smile forever frozen at 34. Sometimes, when the wind moved through the open windows, I swore I could hear his laugh, faint, familiar, heartbreaking. Losing him had carved a hole in me that nothing could fill. And yet, against all odds, I had tried to keep going. Morning walks, the garden, my book club, the quiet routines that keep grief at bay. Until that afternoon, when everything I thought I knew about my family began to unravel. I remember noticing the sound first, a distant roar, growing louder. When I looked up from the porch, I saw a silver car speeding down the old dirt road that curved around the lake. Dust billowed up behind it in thick clouds. I squinted, recognizing the car even before I saw the driver. Veronica, my daughter-in-law, my son's widow. It had been weeks since I'd last seen her, and even then, she had seemed strange, detached. She'd come by on the anniversary of Daniel's death, wearing sunglasses though it was cloudy, speaking in short, clipped sentences. We'd stood awkwardly in the living room, two women bound by loss, but separated by something far colder than grief. When she left, I'd tried to tell myself she was just coping differently. But deep down, something in her eyes, restless, guarded, had unsettled me. Now, watching her car barrel toward the lake, I knew something was terribly wrong. No one drove that way unless they were running from something or toward something they shouldn't. She slammed on the brakes so hard the tires screeched. The sound tore through the stillness. My teacup slipped from my hand and shattered against the porch boards. I stood frozen as she jumped out of the car. She was wearing a gray dress. I recognized it was the one Daniel had given her for their first anniversary. Only now it clung to her body like she had been sweating or crying or both. Her hair, usually smooth and styled, was a tangled mess. Her face looked flushed, almost feverish. She yanked open the trunk and pulled out a large brown suitcase leather. Expensive, familiar. I knew that suitcase. I had given it to her myself on her wedding day. "So you can carry your dreams wherever you go," I had said back then. What a fool I was. The suitcase looked heavy. Veronica's knees buckled slightly as she lifted it out. I watched her glance around in quick, nervous jerks, like a thief afraid of being caught. Her breathing was ragged even from where I stood, 100 yards away. She walked toward the water, her movements stiff and deliberate, as though every step was an argument between guilt and resolve. "Veronica?" I called, my voice trembling, but she didn't turn. She didn't even hesitate. She swung the suitcase once, twice, then hurled it into the lake. The sound of impact echoed across the water. For a brief moment, the suitcase floated dark against the mirrored surface, then began to sink, slowly, relentlessly, until it disappeared beneath the ripples. Veronica stood there for several seconds, breathing hard. Then she pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. Was she crying? Praying? I couldn't tell. And then, without another glance toward the lake, she ran back to the car, slammed the door, and sped off, the sound of the engine fading into the distance. I didn't move for what felt like forever. My mind refused to make sense of what I had just witnessed. A suitcase, the lake, my daughter-in-law so frantic, so desperate. The silence afterward was unbearable. The cicadas had gone quiet, and even the air felt heavy, like the world was holding its breath. A strange dread settled in my stomach. It wasn't curiosity, it was fear, the kind that creeps up your spine and whispers that something is horribly wrong. I felt it then, deep and undeniable. I started walking, my feet barely touching the ground. By the time I reached the porch steps, my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I ran something I hadn't done in years. The path down to the lake was uneven, dotted with stones and roots, but I didn't stop. The humid air clung to my skin, and my chest ached, but the thought that kept pushing me forward was simple and terrifying. What had she thrown into that lake? When I reached the shore, my breath was coming in gasps. The water rippled slightly where the suitcase had sunk. For a moment, I thought it was gone completely, but then I saw it just barely floating a few feet from the reeds. It hadn't gone under yet. Without thinking, I stepped into the water. It was colder than I expected, almost shockingly so. My skirt soaked through instantly. Mud squelched between my toes. But I didn't care. I waded deeper, reaching for the suitcase. It was heavier than I imagined, the leather slick and slimy. My fingers slipped off the handle twice before I managed to grab it properly. As I dragged it toward the shore, the weight pulled me forward, nearly toppling me. The suitcase hit a shallow patch and stopped moving. I took a deep breath, braced myself, and yanked hard. It inched closer. My arms burned, my heart pounded, but I didn't stop. Then, just as I was about to pull it onto the sand, I heard something. A sound, faint, muffled, coming from inside the suitcase. My blood turned to ice. At first, I thought it was the wind or maybe an animal caught nearby. But no, the sound came again, unmistakable now. A small, weak cry. I froze, staring at the dripping suitcase. My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped it. No, no, please. Dear God, don't let it be what I think it is. The zipper was rusted and stiff. My fingers slipped again and again as I tried to pull it open. My vision blurred with tears. Come on, I whispered through clenched teeth. Please, please. The sound from inside grew softer, fading. When the zipper finally gave way, I flung the lid open. For a heartbeat, the world went silent. Inside, wrapped in a soaked light blue blanket, was a baby, a newborn. So small, so still, his tiny face pale as wax. My scream caught in my throat. I fell to my knees, the suitcase splashing beside me. My hands shook as I reached for him. He was ice cold. I pressed 2 fingers to his neck, searching for life, for hope, and felt nothing. No, 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 I sobbed. Please no. Then barely there, a faint breath brushed against my cheek. A tremor, a whisper of life. He was alive. Everything blurred after that. I lifted him out of the suitcase, cradling him to my chest. My clothes were soaked, my hair plastered to my face, but I didn't feel any of it. I ran stumbling, gasping, praying back toward the house. My feet bled from the stones, but I kept running. By the time I reached the porch, I was screaming for help, though no one lived near enough to hear. I kicked open the front door, grabbed the phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. When the operator answered, I could barely form words. A baby, please. He's not breathing. He's cold. Please hurry. Ma'am, I need you to calm down, she said. Tell me your address. I gave it to her in a rush. The operator instructed me to clear a flat surface, to dry and warm the baby. I swept everything off the kitchen table and laid him down gently. His tiny chest barely moved. Is he breathing? She asked. Barely, I said, my voice breaking. Keep him warm. Help is on the way. I grabbed a towel, rubbing his tiny arms and legs. His skin slowly shifted from gray to pink, the faintest hint of color returning. I wrapped him in dry fabric, held him close again, whispering words I didn't even remember later. You're okay. You're safe now. Please, stay with me. The sound of sirens reached me minutes later, though it felt like hours. Red and blue lights flashed through my kitchen window. I ran to the door as two paramedics rushed in. One of them, a woman with dark hair tied back, took the baby from me with practiced gentleness. She listened to his chest, then nodded to her partner. He's alive. Weak pulse, severe hypothermia. We need to move now. They carried him out on a small stretcher, tubes and oxygen masks appearing in a blur of motion. I followed them into the ambulance, my knees weak, my hands shaking. I couldn't stop staring at the tiny, fragile life wrapped in towels. And as the sirens wailed and the world outside blurred into streaks of color, a single thought took hold in my mind, cold, clear, and unshakable. Whatever was inside that suitcase was never meant to be found. The ride to Westlake Regional Hospital felt endless, though I knew the ambulance was racing through every red light between Willow Lake and Maple Hollow. The paramedic kept his voice steady as he called out vitals numbers I couldn't make sense of. My world had shrunk to that fragile little body lying on the stretcher, a bundle of damp towels and plastic tubes. The sirens screamed above us, but all I could hear was the faint rhythm of the heart monitor and my own whispered prayers. When we arrived, everything blurred into motion. Bright lights, sliding doors, nurses shouting terms I didn't understand. Neonatal code blue, severe hypothermia, possible aspiration. I tried to follow, but a nurse blocked me gently with her arm. Please wait here, ma'am, she said softly. They're working on him. I stood rooted to the spot, my clothes dripping onto the polished floor. My fingers felt numb, my breathing shallow. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I was even alive, or just some ghost trapped between disbelief and horror. A nurse, older, kind eyes behind fogged-up glasses, approached with a blanket. Let's get you warm, she murmured. You're shaking. I pulled him out of the lake, I whispered. He was in a suitcase. My daughter-in-law. She threw it. Her expression didn't change, but something flickered behind her eyes, a quick flash of disbelief mixed with sympathy. I understand, she said softly. The police will want to talk to you soon. For now, please, sit down. She led me to a small waiting area that smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. I sank into the hard plastic chair and stared at my trembling hands. The towel they'd wrapped around me was already damp. The nurse returned a few minutes later, with dry scrubs and a paper cup of tea. I'm Carol, she said, setting the cup down. I'll keep you updated when I can. Thank you, I managed to say. My voice barely sounded human. The clock above the reception desk ticked loudly. Every second was torture. I thought about the suitcase, how heavy it had been, how it had almost sunk before I reached it. If I had waited even 1 minute longer. No, I couldn't think about that. After what felt like hours, a young doctor entered the waiting room. His face was drawn with exhaustion, but his tone was calm. Ma'am, the baby is stable for now, he said. He's in intensive care. He suffered hypothermia and swallowed some water, but he's breathing on his own. The next 48 hours will be critical. I nodded, tears welling in my eyes. Will he live? I don't know, he said honestly. But you saved his life tonight. If you hadn't pulled him out, he wouldn't have made it another 5 minutes. I pressed my shaking hands together, whispering a silent thank you. But even as relief washed over me, a darker thought crept in. Veronica had done this. My own daughter-in-law had tried to drown a baby. My mind rebelled against it. I wanted to deny it, to believe there was some misunderstanding, but I had seen her. I had seen her throw that suitcase into the water with my own eyes. Not long after, 2 police officers entered the waiting area. One was a tall woman with sharp, serious features and hair tied back in a neat bun. The other, a younger man with a notebook in hand. "I'm Detective Claire Morrison," the woman said, showing me her badge. "This is Officer Hayes. We need to ask you some questions about what happened at Willow Lake." I nodded, still clutching the paper cup of tea, though it had gone cold. "Of course. Let's start from the beginning," Claire said. "Tell me everything you saw." I recounted the entire story, how I'd seen Veronica's car, how she'd thrown the suitcase, how I'd run to the lake and pulled it out. I described the sound, the baby's cry, the call to 911. The words tumbled out in fragments, my voice breaking halfway through. When I finished, Claire's face was unreadable. She took notes carefully. "You said the car was silver?" "Yes, a silver sedan. A Toyota Camry, I think." And you're certain it was your daughter-in-law?" "Completely," I said. "I'd recognize her anywhere. Same car, same dress. The gray one Daniel bought her." Claire exchanged a look with Hayes. "When was the last time you spoke with her before this?" "About 3 weeks ago," I said. "On Daniel's anniversary." "Did she seem distressed?" I hesitated. She was different. Cold. Avoided eye contact. I thought she was grieving. But now I think, "You think she might have been hiding something?" Claire finished for me. I nodded. The detective wrote a few more notes, then looked up. "We'll verify your statement, Mrs. Coleman. But I have to ask, why would your daughter-in-law do something like this? Do you have any idea?" The question hit me like a slap. "No," I said, my voice trembling. "I don't understand any of it. She's my son's wife. I thought she loved him." Claire's gaze softened slightly. "We'll find out the truth. For now, please don't contact her if she reaches out. We'll need to speak to her ourselves." After they left, I sat there staring at my hands, numb. The nurse Carol came back, placing another blanket over my shoulders. "You did the right thing," she said gently. "You saved that child." But it didn't feel like I'd saved anything. It felt like I had opened a door to something terrible, something that had been buried deep beneath the calm surface of Willow Lake. Hours passed. The hospital grew quiet, except for the distant hum of machines. I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every time a door opened, I looked up, hoping someone would tell me the baby was improving. At around 3 in the morning, Reverend Paul appeared. Someone must have called him. He sat beside me in silence for a long time. "Sometimes," he said finally, "God puts us in places we don't understand, to do things we never thought we could." I shook my head. "This doesn't feel like a blessing, Paul. It feels like a curse." He didn't argue. He just placed his hand over mine and whispered a prayer. For the baby. For Daniel. For strength. When dawn broke, pale light streamed through the waiting room windows. I hadn't slept. I hadn't even blinked for long stretches of time. Every sound made me jump: the rattle of carts, the soft murmur of nurses changing shifts. At 7, Carol appeared again. "The baby's still stable," she said, handing me a cup of coffee. "His temperature's coming up. He's responding to treatment. That's a good sign." I managed a weak smile. "Thank you, Carol. I don't even know his name." "None of us do," she said softly. "No identification, no birth records yet. The police are looking into it." Before I could answer, Detective Morrison returned. She looked tired but focused, a manila folder tucked under her arm. "Mrs. Coleman," she said, "we've run into a complication." My heart dropped. "What do you mean?" Claire set the folder on the table and opened it. We pulled security footage from the grocery store in Maple Hollow, about 10 miles from the lake. It shows your daughter-in-law's car in the parking lot at 5:20 yesterday afternoon. But that's impossible, I said. I saw her at the lake around 5:15. I know what I saw. Claire met my eyes evenly. I'm not saying you didn't see someone, but the camera's timestamp checks out. We verified it. The world seemed to tilt around me. You think I made it up? I think grief can play tricks on people, she said gently. You've been through a lot, and your relationship with Veronica was strained. That doesn't mean I'm delusional, I snapped, louder than I intended. A nurse passing by turned to look. I lowered my voice. I know what I saw, Claire nodded. Then we'll find proof. But until we can locate Veronica, all we have are your words. She handed me her card. If you remember anything else, call me, day or night. And then she left, her calm professionalism lingering in the air like the echo of doubt. I sat back, the coffee cooling in my hands. My mind replayed the scene at the lake over and over: the car, the dress, the suitcase. It had to be her. But what if it wasn't? What if I had been so blinded by grief and resentment that I'd seen what I wanted to see? No. I shook my head. I wasn't wrong. I couldn't be. Through the glass window of the NICU, I caught a glimpse of the baby, tiny, still wrapped in wires and tubes, fighting for his life. Something stirred inside me, something fierce and protective. I didn't know who he was or where he came from, but I knew one thing for certain. He wasn't just a victim. He was a clue, and whoever had tried to drown him wasn't going to get away with it. Not while I was still breathing. The next 2 days blurred into one long stretch of waiting. I slept in the hospital chair, half awake, half haunted. Every few hours, Nurse Carol would check on me, her soft shoes whispering across the tile. She'd bring me coffee that tasted like metal and tell me the same thing. He's stable, but still critical. Those words became a rhythm, almost a prayer. When I was finally allowed to see the baby through the glass wall of the neonatal unit, my breath caught. He looked impossibly small pink now, not gray, his tiny chest rising and falling beneath the hum of machines. A name tag on the incubator read simply, Baby Boy Doe. I pressed my palm to the glass. You're not a John Doe, I whispered. You're somebody's whole world. You just don't know it yet. Detective Morrison returned that afternoon. Her hair was messier, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. She carried another folder, thicker this time. Mrs. Coleman, can we talk privately? She led me into a consultation room with beige walls and humming fluorescent lights. We've made progress, she said, sliding a sheet of paper across the table. It was a printout from the state lab. We ran the baby's DNA through the newborn registry. No matches. But the lab flagged something unexpected. My heart thudded. What kind of unexpected? We compared a sample from the baby with a DNA swab taken from your coffee cup yesterday, she said. Standard protocol. The result shows roughly 25% shared DNA. I blinked, not understanding. What are you saying? Mrs. Coleman, Claire said gently. This child is your biological grandson. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. That's not possible. My son Daniel, he didn't have any children. Claire's gaze didn't waver. According to the hospital's calculations, the baby is 3 days old, which means your daughter-in-law was about 8 months pregnant when Daniel died. My breath caught like a sob. No, she never told anyone. She couldn't have. She hid it, Claire said quietly. Probably under loose clothing. We've confirmed, through her medical records, that she stopped seeing her physician months before the accident. I sank back in the chair, the air gone from my lungs. Daniel, my boy. He'd never known he was going to be a father. Or maybe he had and never got the chance to tell me. Why would she hide a pregnancy? I whispered. Claire folded her hands. We think it ties to your son's death. We've reopened the case file. I looked up sharply. Reopened? You said it was an accident. That's what the report said, she replied. But new evidence suggests the brakes on Daniel's car were tampered with. The residue we found doesn't match normal wear. The words landed like a physical blow. Tampered. You're saying someone killed him? Claire nodded slowly. We're not ready to make a public statement, but yes. And given everything that's happened, the insurance payout, the hidden pregnancy, the attempt on this baby's life, Veronica Coleman is our prime suspect. For a moment, all I could hear was the hum of the fluorescent light. Then, softly, my son trusted her. He loved her. Claire's eyes softened. Sometimes love blinds us to the truth. I wanted to scream, to break something, but my body felt frozen. The image of Veronica tossing that suitcase into the lake replayed in my mind, clearer than ever. Now I knew why she'd looked so frantic, so desperate. She wasn't grieving. She was cleaning up the last piece of evidence. When Claire left, I walked down the sterile corridor to the NICU. Through the glass, the baby shifted slightly, his tiny fist opening, closing. My grandson, Daniel's child. The last piece of him left in this world. Tears stung my eyes. You're his miracle, I whispered. And she tried to throw you away. Later that evening, Carol brought me soup and sat beside me. You look like you haven't eaten in days. I'm not hungry. She hesitated, then said, The detective told me what they found. I nodded, unable to speak. Then you know that baby belongs with you, she said. You pulled him from the water for a reason. No. Her words were kind, but they carried a weight I wasn't ready for. I stared into the soup until the surface went cold. The following morning, a young woman in a gray suit approached me in the waiting area. Mrs. Coleman, I'm Sarah Douglas, from Child Protective Services. Her smile was polite, but rehearsed. She carried a clipboard filled with forms. We're here to ensure the infant's safety until permanent arrangements can be made. What kind of arrangements? State custody, temporarily, she said matter-of-factly. Until we determine next of kin. I am his next of kin, I said. She looked at her notes. Technically, yes, but there's a legal process. You're not yet registered as a guardian. You'll need background checks, a home inspection, a psychological evaluation. I cut her off. He's a newborn. He needs family, not paperwork. Sarah's voice remained calm. I understand how emotional this is, but procedure exists to protect the child. I stared at her, disbelief curdling into anger. Protect him? From who? From me? Carol stepped in, her tone gentle. Sarah, maybe we can give Mrs. Coleman a little time before discussing custody details? Sarah nodded, scribbling a note. Of course. I'll return once she's rested. When she left, I turned to Carol, tears welling again. They want to take him away. After everything, after pulling him from that lake, they want to give him to strangers. Carol squeezed my hand. The system can be cruel in its caution. But you're strong, Maggie. You've faced worse. That night, I finally went home to change clothes. The house felt alien. Daniel's pictures stared down from the mantel, smiling at a life that no longer existed. His empty room smelled faintly of cedar and aftershave. On the dresser, a photo of him and Veronica at their wedding mocked me, her head resting on his shoulder, both of them glowing with the innocence of people who believe love will fix everything. I sat on his bed and let the tears come, silent and bitter. You didn't deserve this, I whispered. You didn't deserve her. Outside, the wind rattled the windows. The reflection of the lake shimmered beyond the trees, dark and endless. Somewhere beneath that surface, I imagined all the secret still buried lies, greed, and the remnants of a suitcase that almost became a coffin. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Unknown number. My stomach tightened as I answered. Maggie? It was Claire. We have confirmation from the forensic lab. The fluid found on the car's brake line matches the same chemical residue from a garage owned by a man named Eddie Ramos. He worked as a freelance mechanic. Veronica transferred $2,000 to his account the day before your son's accident. So she paid him, I said numbly. He's in custody. He's confessed to loosening the brake line at her request. He claims he didn't know it would cause a fatal crash, he just needed the money. I closed my eyes. My hands clenched into fists. And Veronica? She's gone, Claire said. No bank activity, no phone records. It's like she vanished. She'll come back, I said softly. People like her always do. Claire hesitated. We'll issue a warrant for murder and attempted infanticide, but you need to be careful. If she contacts you, call me immediately. When the call ended, I sat in the darkness, listening to the tick of that old kitchen clock. 6 months ago, I'd lost my son. Now I knew I'd lost him to murder. The next morning, I drove back to the hospital before sunrise. I parked by the lake road, the same path where Veronica had thrown the suitcase. The water was calm again, deceptively peaceful. I walked to the edge and whispered into the mist. You didn't win, Veronica. He's alive. He's alive. Inside the hospital, Carol met me with a tired smile. He's breathing on his own now, she said. They'll move him out of intensive care soon. I pressed my hands over my heart. Relief flooded me, mingled with the ache of everything I'd learned. Claire arrived later that day with a legal document for me to sign temporary guardianship while the investigation continued. This will let you make medical decisions for him, she explained. It's not full custody, but it's a start. As I signed, I felt something shift inside me. For the first time since Daniel's death, I had a purpose. Protect the child. Seek justice. Before leaving, Claire paused at the door. Mrs. Coleman, she said, I've worked homicides for 20 years. I've seen mothers lose everything, but I've never seen one fight like you. Don't stop now. When she was gone, I turned to the window where the baby slept in his tiny crib, his chest rising steadily. Your father fought for you too, I whispered. And now it's my turn. The lake might have tried to take him. His mother might have tried to erase him. But I had pulled him back from the darkness, and I wasn't letting go again. Whatever came next, courts, police, ghosts, I would face it all. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about redemption. For Daniel, for me, and for the fragile new life that had survived the depths. I didn't sleep much after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's car spinning off the wet road, saw Veronica's face framed in the glow of headlights, her expression as unreadable as it was the night she married my son. The truth had come too late for Daniel, but there was still Ethan, his son, his legacy, his unfinished heartbeat, and I would not let the world take him from me. The morning after signing the guardianship papers, I arrived at Westlake Hospital before dawn. The halls smelled of antiseptic and coffee. Carol greeted me with her usual calm smile. He had a good night, she said. He's taking formula now. Small sips but steady. I followed her into the neonatal unit. The machines were quieter now. The baby's cheeks had a faint blush of color. I rested my palm against the glass of his crib. Good morning, my love, I whispered. You keep fighting. Grandma's here. Carol leaned closer. Have you thought about a name? I hesitated. The thought had been circling in my mind for days, unspoken. Daniel had once told me long before Veronica came into the picture that if he ever had a son, he wanted to name him Ethan after his grandfather. I smiled faintly through my tears. Yes, I said, his name is Ethan. Ethan Daniel Coleman. Carol scribbled it on a note for the nurse's station. Then welcome to the world, little Ethan, she said softly. That small act, naming him, made everything suddenly real. He wasn't just a victim anymore. He was family, flesh of my flesh, the last spark of my son's life. And I knew what I had to do. Keep him safe, no matter the cost. 2 days later, Sarah Douglas from Child Protective Services returned. Her clipboard was as neat as her tone. Mrs. Coleman, The baby's condition is improving. That means we have to begin placement proceedings. My heart stuttered. Placement? Temporary foster care, she clarified. Until the court finalizes custody. It's standard. You can't take him, I said, my voice trembling. He's my grandson. I understand truly, she said, keeping her tone measured. But you're not yet certified as a guardian. The process involves several steps: background checks, a home inspection, a psychological evaluation. I already told you I'd do anything. Just don't send him to strangers. Sarah sighed. Mrs. Coleman, I'm not your enemy. But the law is clear. If you meet the requirements, you can petition for full custody. Until then, Ethan will stay in state care. The words felt like cold iron pressing against my chest. State care, I repeated. You mean foster homes? She didn't answer directly. I'll give you the list of requirements. It's long, but not impossible. When she left, I sank into the chair by Ethan's crib, shaking. Carol came over quietly, placing her hand on my shoulder. The system can be cruel, Maggie, but you're tougher than it looks. You got him out of that lake, don't stop now. That night, I drove home with the paperwork Sarah had given me. 6 pages of boxes and signatures, background checks, fingerprints, a home inspection, personal references, medical clearance, a child care certification course. At 63, it felt like being asked to climb Everest, but I wasn't climbing for myself. I was climbing for Ethan. I started the next morning. I filled out every line of the form, listing my late husband's pension as income, the house on Willow Lake as property. I called Reverend Paul for a character reference, and my old teaching colleague, Nancy, for another. Both agreed immediately. You're doing God's work, Reverend Paul said. That child belongs with you. It took 2 weeks for the background check to clear. When the letter arrived, saying I had no disqualifying records, I nearly cried from relief. Then came the medical exam, blood work, reflex tests, mental evaluations. The doctor glanced at the form and smiled. Healthy as a horse, he said. Maybe a tired horse, but still kicking. The hardest part was the psychological evaluation. A young therapist with square glasses and a patient voice asked question after question. Do you suffer from depression? Have you experienced trauma recently? How would you describe your relationship with your daughter-in-law? That last one made my chest tighten. I told the truth, or as much of it as I could, without screaming. Distant. We were never close. She changed after Daniel's death. The therapist took notes. Do you harbor anger toward her? Yes, I said plainly. But anger isn't madness. It's grief with direction. She looked up at me then, surprised by the steadiness in my tone. That's quite a statement, Mrs. Coleman. I gave a tired smile. You learn a lot about emotion when you've buried more than one person you love. The evaluation took 3 hours. When it was over, she shook my hand. I'll recommend approval, she said. You're grieving, but grounded. Then came the home inspection. 2 women from social services arrived at 9 sharp with clipboards and professional smiles. They checked everything: smoke alarms, window locks, cabinet latches. They opened closets, tested faucets, measured stair rails. One even ran her finger across a shelf, as if dust were grounds for disqualification. You'll need a crib, one of them said. Approved model, safety certified. I'll buy one today, I promised. They handed me a pamphlet. You'll also need outlet covers, safety gates, and baby-proof latches. We'll revisit in 2 weeks. After they left, I sat on the couch, surrounded by the ghost of Daniel's laughter and the echo of my own exhaustion. Then I opened my laptop and started ordering everything on the list. Crib, changing table, car seat, monitors, diapers. The total came to over $1,200, nearly half my savings. But money had stopped mattering. Over the next week, Carol visited to help me set things up. The crib goes by the window, she said, her sleeves rolled up. Babies love natural light. Oh, we worked in silence for a while, the rhythm soothing. When we were done, I stood back and looked at the room. Daniel's old bedroom, once filled with trophies and guitars, had become a nursery. Soft yellow walls, a white crib, a mobile that played a lullaby when wound up. I felt the tears coming again. He would have been a good father, I said softly. Carol squeezed my hand. And now you'll be the one to show his son what love looks like. And the days blurred into routine hospital visits, forms, interviews. Each step brought me closer, but each night fear gnawed at me. Veronica was still out there. Every slow car that passed the house made me tense. Every creak in the night pulled me from sleep. I installed new locks, a motion light on the porch, even a camera pointed at the driveway. It wasn't paranoia, it was survival. One afternoon, Claire called. "We've located Veronica's aunt," she said. "She lives near the state line, claims she hasn't seen Veronica in 2 years. Do you believe her?" "I believe she's scared of her niece," Claire replied. "Veronica borrowed money and never paid it back. She's running out of people to hide with. Then she'll come for the baby," I said. There was a pause. "That's why we've arranged for a patrol to pass by your house twice a night. Just in case." "Thank you." By the time the final evaluation meeting came, 6 weeks had passed since I'd pulled Ethan from the lake. I was thinner, paler, but my resolve had turned to steel. Sarah met me at the courthouse with her usual clipboard. "You've completed all the requirements," she said, almost smiling. "Now the judge will review your petition." Inside the courtroom, my knees trembled as I stood before the bench. The judge, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, flipped through my file. "Mrs. Coleman," she said, "this is highly unusual. A 63-year-old woman petitioning for custody of an infant." I swallowed hard. "Yes, Your Honor." She looked up. "But it's also unusual for a grandmother to dive into a lake to save her grandson's life. That shows character." Tears burned my eyes. "I've read your evaluations," the judge continued. "You're healthy, mentally fit, and you've prepared your home. You've demonstrated extraordinary commitment." Then she set the papers down. "Therefore, I'm granting you temporary custody for 6 months. During that time, Child Services will conduct regular check-ins. If all goes well, custody can become permanent." I covered my mouth, a sob escaping. Sarah touched my shoulder lightly. "Congratulations, Mrs. Coleman." The judge gave a small, rare smile. "Welcome to motherhood again." The gavel struck, and just like that, the weight of the world lifted off my chest. 3 days later, Carol met me at the hospital. She helped me fasten Ethan's car seat for the first time. His tiny fingers wrapped around mine as if to say, "We made it." I drove home slower than I ever had. Every turn deliberate, every bump a threat. When we reached the house, I carried him inside and laid him gently in his new crib. The lullaby mobile began to spin, soft music filling the room. I stood there watching him breathe, the sunlight painting gold across his hair. For the first time in months, my heart felt steady. Daniel was gone, but part of him was still here, alive, fragile, and mine to protect. And though I didn't know what waited ahead, I made a silent vow that night, whispered into the dim air of that nursery. "Whatever it takes, Ethan, I'll keep you safe. Not the law, not fear, not even your mother will ever take you from me." For a few blessed weeks, peace returned to my life at least. The kind of fragile peace that trembles if you breathe too hard. Ethan slept in his crib by the window, the soft chime of the mobile lulling him into dreams. Every morning, I'd sit by his side, humming lullabies I once sang to Daniel. The house, which had been a mausoleum of memories, began to feel alive again. But peace doesn't last long when the truth is still buried. It started with a letter. I found it one gray afternoon while cleaning Daniel's old study. The room smelled of dust and pine wood. the faint scent of his aftershave still clinging to the corners. I had been sorting through boxes of his tools when a stack of old notebooks fell from the shelf. Beneath them was a sealed envelope, yellowed with time, addressed in Daniel's handwriting, "To Mom, if anything ever happens to me." My breath caught. For a long time, I couldn't bring myself to open it. My hands shook as I traced his handwriting, those strong loops I knew by heart. Finally, I slid my thumb under the flap and unfolded the letter. The paper was creased, his ink slightly faded, but the words were clear. "Mom, if you're reading this, something's gone wrong. I don't want to scare you, but I need you to know that if I die, it won't be an accident. Veronica has changed. She's not the woman I thought she was. Lately, she's been secretive, meeting people behind my back, hiding phone calls. She keeps talking about insurance, money, a fresh start. I tried to confront her, but she always cries, says I'm paranoid. Maybe I am. But if something happens to me, promise me you'll protect whoever she's trying to hide from me. Promise you'll find the truth." The letter slipped from my hands. My knees gave out, and I sank to the floor, shaking. The world tilted around me, a blur of tears and disbelief. Daniel had known. He'd seen it coming, and I'd been too blind to notice. I stayed there for what felt like hours, clutching that letter to my chest, whispering apologies to the silence. "I'm sorry, my boy. I should have seen it. I should have protected you." When the grief settled enough for me to think, I called Detective Morrison. She arrived within the hour, her unmarked car pulling into the driveway as dusk fell. I handed her the letter without a word. She read it slowly, her jaw tightening. "This changes everything," she said. "If Daniel wrote this before his death, it proves intent, premeditation. Veronica can be charged with first-degree murder. Will it help you find her?" I asked. Claire nodded. "Maybe, but there's more. Eddie Ramos, the mechanic he's been talking. He says Veronica was involved with someone else, a man named Richard Hale." I frowned. Her maiden name was Hale. "Exactly. We think it's her brother," Claire said. "He's got a record: fraud, extortion, assault. Ramos says he saw him at the garage the day the brakes were sabotaged." "So it was both of them," I whispered. "She killed my son, and he helped her." Claire's eyes were grim. "We believe they planned to collect the insurance, flee the state, and disappear. But Daniel's death wasn't enough. She must have realized the baby could expose her lies, DNA, inheritance, everything. So she tried to erase him too." I stared out the window at the lake beyond the trees, its surface dark and still, the same lake that had tried to swallow my grandson whole. "Where is she now?" "Still missing," Claire said. "But we're closing in. Her brother's last credit card use was in Georgia 2 weeks ago. We've alerted every state between here and Florida." After she left, I sat in Daniel's study for a long time. The letter spread open before me. I felt both fury and guilt-fury that she'd destroyed my son's life, guilt that I hadn't listened when he'd tried to warn me. That night, as Ethan slept, I made another promise to Daniel this time, not just to God. "I'll finish what you started, my boy," I whispered. "I'll bring her down." Over the next few days, I started searching through Daniel's old computer, hoping to find more clues. Most of his files were ordinary work projects, emails, photos, but one folder stood out: private. It was password protected. I tried his usual combinations, birthdays, anniversaries, but none worked. Finally, I typed Ethan. The screen blinked and opened. Inside were scanned documents, insurance policies, emails between Daniel and his lawyer, and something else, a digital receipt for a storage unit rental dated 2 weeks before his death. The unit was located near Maple Docks, the old warehouse district by the lake. A chill crept down my spine. That was the same area where the police had found tire tracks matching Veronica's car. I called Claire immediately. "There's a storage unit Daniel rented before he died," I said. "We need to see what's inside." The next morning, she met me at the site. The air was cold and damp, the metal doors glinting under gray skies. The clerk handed over a key. Unit 47, been unpaid for 6 months, he said. When the door rolled up, a wave of dust and mildew hit us. Inside were boxes stacked neatly, labeled in Daniel's handwriting. Finances, photos, legal. Claire opened one and pulled out a folder. Inside were bank statements, showing large transfers from Daniel's account to Veronica's amounts that coincided with the payments to Eddie Ramos and to her brother, Richard. "This is a gold mine," Claire murmured. "Enough evidence to secure an indictment." In another box, we found something stranger, a black notebook filled with Daniel's notes about Veronica's behavior. Each entry was dated, precise, almost clinical. June 3. She lied about visiting her mother. Phone shows call to unknown number. June 17. Found receipt for cash withdrawal she can't explain. July 2. Confronted her. She cried. Said, "I don't trust her, but I can't shake the feeling she's planning something." August 12. I think she's pregnant. She won't admit it, but I saw the prenatal vitamins. August 28. "I'm scared, Mom. I'm really scared." I felt the air leave my lungs again. Each word was a wound reopened. Claire took photos of everything, bagged the originals for evidence. "This is enough to issue a national warrant," she said. "If she's still in the country, we'll find her." But even as she said it, a sense of unease coiled in my stomach. Veronica was clever, too clever to be caught easily. That night, after putting Ethan to bed, I sat in the living room with the letter and notebook spread before me. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The house felt both safe and fragile, like a shelter made of glass. I poured myself a cup of tea, trying to steady my hands. The reflection in the window looked older than I remembered, lines deeper, eyes harder. I'd become someone I didn't recognize, part mother, part detective, part warrior. Just as I began to gather the papers, the phone rang. I froze. It was nearly midnight. I picked it up cautiously. "Hello?" A pause. Then a voice low, familiar, venomous. "Madgie," she said. "It's been a while." My blood ran cold. "Veronica, you've been busy," she said lightly. "Playing hero. Stealing what's mine." "He's not yours," I snapped. "You tried to kill him." She laughed softly, a sound that made my skin crawl. "You always were dramatic. I was cleaning up my mistakes. You should have stayed out of it." My grip tightened on the phone. "Where are you?" "Close," she said. "Closer than you think. And don't bother calling your friend the detective. By the time she gets there, I'll already have what I came for." The line went dead. For a long moment, I just stood there, heart pounding, the phone still pressed to my ear. Then I ran to Ethan's room. He was still asleep, breathing softly. Relief flooded through me, followed by terror. I called Claire immediately. "She called me," I whispered. "She's here. Somewhere near." Claire's voice sharpened. "Lock your doors. Don't go outside. We're on our way." I hung up and checked every window, every latch. The night outside was pitch black, the lake hidden under the weight of the storm. Lightning flashed in the distance. I sat in the nursery, holding Ethan in my arms, listening for any sound beyond the rain. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind made my pulse quicken. And as thunder rolled across Willow Lake, I knew one thing for certain: this wasn't over. Veronica had returned, and this time, she wouldn't be running away. The storm rolled in before sunset, heavy clouds swallowing the pale autumn light. By nightfall, Willow Lake was a mirror of black glass, its surface broken only by raindrops that struck like whispers. I had not slept since Veronica's call. Every creak of the house made me flinch. Every gust of wind against the window sounded like footsteps. Ethan slept in my arms, small and warm, unaware of the danger circling outside. Detective Claire Morrison had promised to send a patrol, but the roads were flooding, and the nearest unit was miles away. I checked the locks for the 5th time that hour, my breath shallow. I knew Veronica. She was cunning, patient, and desperate. And desperate people are the most dangerous of all. The phone rang again. My stomach twisted. I answered, my voice shaking. Veronica. You're predictable, Maggie, she said. The wind howled faintly behind her words, still clinging to that house, to the lake, to ghosts. What do you want? I asked, though I already knew. She laughed, low and cruel. What do you think? You have something that belongs to me. He belongs to me, I said, my voice breaking. He's Daniel's son, my grandson. Daniel's mine, she hissed. Everything he left is mine. The money, the house, even that baby. You think I'll let some shriveled old woman take what's owed to me? You murdered him, I spat. You killed your own husband. The line went silent for a beat. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. You don't understand, Maggie. Daniel was weak. He never knew how to fight for what he wanted. But I did. The phone clicked dead. I stood frozen, clutching the receiver. Then, faintly through the rain, I heard it the sound of tires on gravel. My heart lurched. Headlights flashed through the window, slicing across the walls. I moved fast, setting Ethan in his crib and pulling the blanket higher around him. He stirred but did not wake. I grabbed the old revolver from the drawer by the door, a relic of my late husband's hunting days. My hands trembled as I checked the chamber. It had not been fired in years, but it was loaded. The knock came a moment later, 3 sharp raps that echoed through the storm. Maggie, Veronica's voice called, almost sing-song. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I stayed silent. The rain battered the roof like a drum. I just want what's mine, she said. Let me in, and no one gets hurt. My mind raced. If I opened the door, she'd kill us both. If I waited, she might break in. My eyes darted to the back window, Ethan's window, and my heart froze. A shadow moved outside, sliding along the porch. I acted on instinct. I lifted the gun, pointed it toward the door, and shouted, Leave now, Veronica. The police are coming. She laughed. The police? In this storm? Oh, Maggie. You really are losing it. Then the crash came, the sound of glass shattering in the back room. I turned and ran. The rain poured through the broken window, cold against my face. Veronica climbed through, her hair plastered to her cheeks, eyes wild and gleaming. Put the gun down, she snarled, holding a knife that glinted in the dim light. Stay away from him, I said, raising the revolver. She took a step forward. You think you can shoot me? You don't have it in you. But she was wrong, because in that moment, I saw Daniel's face in my mind, his smile, his voice, his trust, and I saw the way she'd betrayed it all. My fear hardened into something sharp, cold, and absolute. I steadied my hand. Try me, she lunged. I fired. The blast echoed through the house, deafening, final. Veronica fell backward, the knife clattering to the floor. She cried out, clutching her shoulder, blood dark against her gray dress. For a second, all I could hear was the rain and my own ragged breathing. Then she laughed, soft at first, then louder, crazier. You missed anything vital, old woman? She gasped. You just made me angry. She scrambled to her feet and ran toward the front door. I chased her, the revolver heavy in my hand, but she was faster. She threw the door open and fled into the storm. I stood at the threshold, wind whipping my hair, rain drenching my clothes. Lightning flashed, and for a heartbeat, I saw her silhouette running toward the lake, the same lake where it had all begun. I grabbed my phone and called Claire. She's here, I shouted. She's heading toward Willow Lake. Stay inside, Maggie, Claire ordered. Units are on the way, but I was already running. The mud sucked at my boots. The rain stung my skin, but I didn't stop. I followed her down the winding path through the trees until the lake came into view, silver and violent under the lightning. Veronica was near the old boathouse, half collapsed, its roof sagging under years of rot. She turned when she heard me. "You never learn, do you?" she shouted over the storm. "You couldn't save him, and you won't save yourself." "You killed my son," I cried. "You tried to drown his child. You think you'll walk away from that?" She smiled, teeth flashing white in the darkness. "I already did once." She raised the knife again, but before she could move, red and blue lights flashed through the trees. Sirens wailed in the distance. For the first time, fear flickered in her eyes. "Too late," I said, stepping closer. "It's over." But Veronica's expression shifted, panic, twisting into something desperate. She spun toward the water, sprinting for the edge. "You'll never take me alive!" she screamed. "Veronica!" I shouted, reaching out. She didn't stop. She plunged into the lake, vanishing beneath the black surface. Claire and 2 officers reached me seconds later, guns drawn, shouting orders I barely heard. They searched the shoreline, flashlights cutting through the rain, but the water gave nothing back. "Do you think she's—" I started. Claire shook her head grimly. "The lake's deep and cold. If she went under in this storm—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Hours later, when the rain finally stopped, the rescue team dragged the lake. Near dawn, they found the body caught among the reeds, pale and still. Veronica Hale Coleman was gone. I stood at the edge of the shore, the same spot where I had pulled Ethan from the water weeks before. The storm had washed everything clean, the air, the earth, even the ache in my chest. But not the memories. Those would stay forever. Claire joined me, her coat soaked, her expression weary but soft. "It's done," she said quietly. "She can't hurt anyone anymore." I nodded, staring out at the rippling water. "I thought I'd feel relief," I whispered. "But all I feel is empty." "That's how justice feels sometimes," Claire said. "It doesn't fill the hole. It just stops it from getting bigger." We stood there in silence until the sun began to rise, casting gold across the lake. For the first time in months, the surface looked calm, no secrets, no shadows, just peace. When I returned home, Ethan was still asleep in his crib, his tiny hands curled near his face. The morning light spilled across him like a blessing. I knelt beside him, brushing a finger along his cheek. "You're safe now," I whispered. "She's gone." He stirred, then sighed, a soft, contented sound that filled the room. Outside, the storm clouds drifted away, leaving the sky a pale, forgiving blue. I sat there for a long time, listening to the quiet hum of life returning. The nightmare had ended where it began, by the lake. And though justice had come at a terrible cost, I knew Daniel could finally rest. His child lived. His story was finished. As I watched the sunlight dance on the nursery wall, I thought of that first night, when I saw Veronica throw the suitcase into the lake. Back then, I believed I'd witnessed the end of something. But now I understood it had been a beginning. The beginning of truth, the beginning of courage, and the beginning of a new life born from the depths of loss. I kissed Ethan's forehead and whispered, "You'll never know the darkness you came from, my love. Only the light that saved you." And for the first time since my son's death, I smiled quietly, painfully, but with hope. Because even the deepest waters cannot drown what love keeps alive. The weeks that followed felt like stepping out of a nightmare into a dawn that I wasn't sure I deserved. The lake, once a symbol of everything I had lost, now shimmered each morning outside my window, peaceful, almost forgiving. I still heard Daniel's laughter in the quiet corners of the house, but it no longer brought me to tears. It reminded me that love, once planted, never really dies. Ethan grew stronger every day. His cheeks filled out, his cries grew louder, and his eyes, Those same gray-blue eyes his father had followed me everywhere I went. Some mornings, I would hold him by the porch window, whispering stories of his father. How Daniel built his first treehouse at 10 years old. How he'd sneak cookies before dinner. How he once told me that the world was still a good place, no matter how cruel it could be. Now, it was my job to make that world good again for him. Detective Claire visited sometimes. We would share coffee and quiet conversation. She'd bring small updates, paperwork, official closure reports, but mostly, she just sat with me in companionable silence. "You did more than most would ever dare," she said one morning. "You didn't just save a life, you redeemed 2 generations of pain." I looked down at Ethan, sleeping in his bassinet, his tiny hand wrapped around one of my fingers. "I didn't do it for redemption," I said softly. "I did it because I couldn't lose him too." Claire smiled faintly. "That's what makes it redemption." The world around me had slowed. The echoes of fear faded with each sunrise. Yet some nights, I still walked down to the lake. I'd stand by the water's edge, watching the ripples dance beneath the moonlight. I would think of Daniel and of the woman who had tried to erase everything he was. But more than anything, I would think of how life, like the lake, reflects both light and darkness, and how we choose which one to see. I had seen the worst of people, their greed, their cruelty, their cowardice. But I had also seen the best. Compassion from strangers. Courage I didn't know I had. Love that refused to die. That's the strange mercy of survival. It shows you that even in your lowest moment, you can still rise. And for those who've lost faith, who've been betrayed, who've watched everything they loved sink beneath the surface, I want to tell you this. The water doesn't keep what it can't claim. Truth floats, hope breathes. And love, no matter how deep it's buried, finds its way back to the light. So keep holding on. Keep fighting for what's right, even when the world tells you it's too late. Because somewhere out there, someone still needs your courage to survive their own storm. I closed my eyes, listening to the wind brushing across the water. Then, I whispered one final promise to Daniel, to Ethan, and maybe to everyone who had ever been broken. I'm still here. I kept the light, and I'll never let it go.